Sushant Sareen, from the time when Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru said no to a proposed seat in the United Nations Security Council, suggesting that it be given to China and that India could have this conversation later, to a time when the Indian government very unabashedly putting Indian interests first, apart from just being constructive, as Raj said, this is India using all the leverage it has. We're a big country, we're 1.4 billion people, you've got good economic ties with us. The Prime Minister putting it all out there to get these 8 Navy men back.
So Rahul, there are a couple of things which have happened. I think one is that India's weight has also grown. So I think if the Prime Minister understands it and is willing to fight in his particular weight category, since that's the analogy we are using, I think that's par for the course. Go back to the 1950s and just look at what India's condition was. Yes, Prime Minister Nehru would have been the modern day equivalent of a woke to some extent, which Modi clearly is not. Modi is a very, very sharp operator, a guy who understands when he can drive a good bargain, and he's not going to shy away from driving a good bargain, and he's not even afraid of taking risks. So I think there are changes in the objective conditions, but of course there is...
No, so the point I was making, Sushant, was that India is now punching above its weight category. We are punching almost like a United States or a China, where we've decided this is the weight category we belong to, and you're forcing the world to virtually acknowledge that it's not as if the weight category is something that everyone's open about and they're happy for you to rise. You're saying, okay, this is the weight category I think I now belong to, and this is how I'll act.
No, it's not that you think that you belong to that weight category. You've actually started belonging to that weight category. Look, if in purchasing power parity terms, you're the third largest economy in the world, and in absolute terms, you are the fifth, going on to becoming the fourth in the next 1 or 2 years, then clearly you are in a certain category of nations which you were not when you were at number 20 or number 25. So clearly your weight has increased, number one. Number two, the amount of your global footprint of your diplomacy has also increased. Yes, you've also hustled your diplomacy, and I don't think there's anything wrong in that. For example, Raj was talking about what we've done with the Middle East. I think it's remarkable. For decades, we had allowed the Middle East to go, as almost like a monopoly of the Pakistanis, because of precisely, when Rahul, you express a surprise that, how come there is this government which has a very Hindu kind of an approach, making good relations with, the Arab world, which is predominantly Muslim. This is a binary which people like us have created in our heads. I don't think that's a binary which Mr. Modi has, or that's a binary which the Arabs have, or for that matter, that's a binary which, Christian countries have, the United States or the UK or any of the other countries. Countries operate with each other on the basis of their interests, and when they see interests converging, they will engage with each other. Are you confident enough to engage at your own terms? And I think that confidence Mr. Modi and his team bring to the table, and that is what has really changed. That they are not afraid to actually, go ahead, protect India's interest, and manage the contradictions of protecting India's interest while they are engaging with rival players.
Okay, so Vailavad, you've seen India's rise. You understand the Gulf Arab world better than most. How are you looking at, for example, the fact that we have this massive BAPS temple opening in Abu Dhabi, land being given by the Emir, the fact that he's going to Qatar a day after, and also ensuring that before he goes, Qatar releases these 8 Indian sailors. They didn't want to do it. They had already sentenced these Indian Navy personnel. So as far as the court is concerned, this really is an exception that's been pulled by the Qatari establishment for the Indian nation, as it were. So how do you see this happen, and why do you think it's happening?
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you for your compliment and nice word. And the fact of the matter remains that India-Arab relation has been deeply rooted in history. Let's put it that way. I mean, till 1961, the Gulf country was using the Indian rupees, and that's where we know that there are more than 8 million Indian permanently residents of the GCC country, and you have 14 million Indian visiting annually. So therefore, there are more than $75 billion revenue coming from there. So Indian diaspora playing a major role in the integrations and into the development and the infrastructure building of the nations of these countries. So therefore, Indians have been a forefront in many of the countries. Let me put it this way. If we speak of the foreign policy of India in these regards, I think we are in the face of pragmatism in the Indian foreign policy with the personal touch. The personal touch of the Prime Minister have been seen that he has been following each and every country where Indian diaspora are available, and he made it one of his first priority that to meet with them and interact. So therefore, there is a major replay on this. And I wanted to add one more point here, which is maybe, and many of our colleagues on the panel knows that this is not the first temple in Abu Dhabi. In fact, there is Gurdwara, there are temples, there is one, the Lord Krishna temple in Muscat, there is Lord Krishna in Bardubai, there is Shiva temples, there is also Shri Krishna temple in another prominent in Hindu in Dubai. You have in Bahrain also Shiva temple. So all these temples have been there. But to see that we are in the 21st century and you see a new temple being built in Abu Dhabi, it is also a message that the UAE is trying to give to the Indian and to the rest of the world. It is a harmony, interfaith, and also coexistence among nations. And I think that is one of the major steps to integrate the Indian community into the Arab community.
That's on the softer, more spiritual, religious side. The building and the pran pratishtha of this huge temple complex. The other is the more muscular dimension. By Lawad of India's foreign policy, getting these 8 Navy men back just a day before the Indian Prime Minister goes. I mean, Xi Jinping can pull it off. For Joe Biden, because he's President of the United States, most certainly can. I can't think of too many people who would be able to do something like this.
Absolutely, and you should remember that India has signed a huge deal with the oil, with gas, with Qatar, lesser than the price that's been given to the Chinese, and also for 50 years ahead. Therefore, there is a huge relation between India and the Gulf state, and the Indian food security, oil security, diaspora security lies in the mindset of the Indian government. And I think that is a compliment should be given to the South Bloc that they kept the sensitivity and the secrecy of these issues between the two capitals. That's why it was sold. Otherwise, if it had been thrown into the public domain, it would have been a disaster.